Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. My name is Noam Lemish. I'm a professor in the Department of Music and affiliated faculty with the Koshitsky Center. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'll say that again. Welcome, everyone. We're recording. Welcome. On behalf of the Koshitsky Center for Jewish Studies and the Department of Music in the School of Arts, Media, Performance, and Design, I want to thank you for joining us today for our closing event of our second season of Sound and Sense Jewish Music at York. My name is Noam Lemish. I'm a professor in the Department of Music and the Koshitsky Center for Jewish Studies here at York University. And I'm also the artistic director and coordinator of Jewish music at York. I first want to acknowledge that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many indigenous nations. The area known as Takaranto has been caretaken by the Nishnabek Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Now, because this meeting is held virtually, many of you who are joining may be on a different territory, and I want to acknowledge that, as well as the fact that internet connectivity and digital sovereignty disproportionately impact Indigenous communities. So, Sound and Sense Jewish Music Series, the Sound and Sense Jewish Music Series is supported generously by the Azrieli Foundation. And we're really thrilled that we've had a chance to now complete a second season. And as many of you, I'm sure know, we've had a very exciting season with lots of terrific events. And I know that today's event promises to be no different. And I'm really looking forward to it. I will just, let you know to keep your ears and eyes open for announcements about the 2024-2025 season, which will start in September. And I'm already in the process of cooking some really interesting programs for next year. Before I introduce today's speaker, I want to extend my thanks to the director of the Koshitsky Center for Jewish Studies, Kalman Weiser, and the associate director, David Koffman, as well as the dean of AMPD, Sarah Beijing, and the chair of the music department, Karen Burke, for their support of this initiative. Also, a big thanks to Jason Van Eyck from the Azrieli Foundation, and finally, a very large thank you to Julie Feinberg, the coordinator of the Center for Jewish Studies, and as well to Grant McNair from LTS for helping us run today's event. So today we're really lucky to be joined by author David Eisenstadt, who is a public relations consultant who, at the outset of the COVID pandemic, began a hobby writing columns about Canadian Jewish musicians. Writing for various online publications, the columns morphed into a special collection. First, Under the Radar, the first book, Under the Radar, 30 Notable Canadian Jewish Musicians. And then that was followed by a second book, Musicians Under the Radar, 36 Notable Canadian Jewish Performers. And indeed, more is on its way, but I'll let David tell you about that. This is such a wonderful project because the Canadian Jewish music landscape is rich, it is diverse, it has been a part of our country, and this culture here for a long time with tremendous contributions. And it's wonderful to see the way in which David is able to highlight musicians who perhaps have not received attention or the deserved attention up until now, and so under the radar, perhaps no more or slightly less under the radar than they were before. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over now to David Eisenstadt and give him a warm welcome. So I'm looking forward to this very much. Thanks for being here, David.
Absolutely delighted to be with you, Noam, and looking forward to the next number of minutes. And I hope we can share with, it looks like I may have lost you.
No, you're good. Go ahead, David.
Are we good? Okay. There we are. Let's just bring this up a bit. There we are. Essentially, as Noam said, this initiative of ultimately now 2 books and soon to be a third really began with a phone call I received from a friend and a cousin, a fellow by the name of Bernie Farber, who I think people in the Jewish community know. He was for a long time the Ontario region and subsequently the national leader of Canadian Jewish Congress. And it was really at the beginning of the COVID time, if you will, where the Canadian Jewish News as a publication, journalism has been going through rough patches, as we all know. And the Canadian Jewish News tanked for the second time. Bernie and a group of others thought they'd like to see some kind of a bridge, hoping Canadian Jewish News might come back, which in fact, I guess it has in another way, but hoping to find an ongoing link to the community and to provide all sorts of news. And Bernie basically said, how'd you like to write for us? And there are 2 caveats. Number one, we're not going to be soliciting advertising, so this isn't going to be a profit-making venture. Secondly, we're not going to pay any of the writers, but we'd sure like you to be one of our writers. So I thought about that for a bit and did what my late father, Max Eisenstadt, always told me, and this wasn't to be either coy or to be in a negotiating position. He used to always say, just, let things percolate, let them gestate, sleep on it. And I said to Bernie, let me sleep on it, and I'll think about where I might be able to make a contribution. And for all intents and purposes, I'm in. And the bottom line essentially was that I did come back and said, I thought the Canadian Jewish News back then didn't spend enough time covering arts and culture. And I have an idea. There are tons of Canadian Jewish musicians who, in my mind's eye, are forgotten or invisible, or that's where the phrase under the radar came. And I'd like to find a way to write about them from an historic, not a music critique perspective, and just kind of cobble all these factoids together in 750, 800 words, and I'll commit to doing this once a week. So that's what I wound up doing, and that subsequently morphed into our next slide, because I was writing for what was actually initially called CJR, Canadian Jewish Record. And that lasted for about 9 months. And subsequently, when the Canadian Jewish News came back in its online format, another individual by the name of Alan Simons said, I'm publishing a community Jewish news online newsletter called cjnonline.com and cjonline.ca, and how'd you like to write for me? And I thought, well, I was in a groove. And by that point, I guess I had written a whole bunch of articles, if you will, and they started to run. And then I had received a request from a Winnipeg-based publication called the J.ca, and they said, how'd you like to write for us? And I said, well, I can tweak stuff a little bit differently, but basically it'll be the same piece. And that's really the genesis of how a hobby began for me. And before I knew it, someone said, why don't you write a book? And that became the book series, if you will. And that's our next slide. Again, I selected 30 for the first book. As it turned out, 36 in the second. and how 30? Well, my initial research wasn't particularly academic. I had asked various people, family, friends, whatever, can you name notable Canadian Jewish musicians? Inevitably, number one became Leonard Cohen, way above the radar. Number two, Geddy Lee of Rush, way above the radar. Number three, Drake, kind of way above the radar as well. And then it stopped. And that really reinforced my notion of, my goodness, there are so many talents just right across the board. And I'm asking people who one would think would know, but it literally stopped at those three. So that again reinforced this whole issue of under the radar. Why 30? Well, I had written a number of these chapters, which ultimately I had to rework to put into a book format. And I thought 30 would be a good number. And why 30? In the world of journalism, which is the world I have always been a part of, including 50 plus years with our public relations firm, the communications group, tcgpr.com, 30 is the end number on a press release. It's the end number on an article, whether it was submitted to the Toronto Star or CTV News. That's the signal for the editor to know where the story ends. So 30 in journalism is an end, but for me, it became the beginning of a hobby. And that's how 30 came in. The book, the first book, first volume, literally is an A to Z compendium of really talented people. The A in 30 notable Canadian Jewish musicians, the Salomon Amzalag. Salomon Amzalag was kind of like the Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin of Morocco. He was a pop star. He was, the guy that wore the tuxedo. Moved to Montreal, became the first cantor at the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in Montreal. So he kind of had two lives. And just when I discovered him through Danny Ben Lolo, the current cantor, I was just quite taken with how he transitioned his musical career. So he's the A in book number one, volume number one. Zal Yanofsky of The Love and Spoonful is the Z. And so, there you have cantorial pop going to rock. That's number one. In the second book, How 36? Well, it became a natural progression from 30 to 36, double high, and for me, double the enjoyment, double the commitment, double the fun. And that book, again, has an A to Z compendium, starting with Sharon Azraeli, the opera singer. And the Z is another Yanofsky, this time spelled differently. It's Nikki Yanofsky, the pop singer. And again, that's again how things evolved. Third book we'll tell you about in a bit, but I'd like to now sort of tell you about another driver that made this hobby a reality. Let's go to the next slide, and you'll see what my criteria was. How did I decide who should, who shouldn't be in? How would I put it all together? Well, clearly Canadian, not necessarily born in Canada, Jewish, of course. I was looking at individuals. I was looking at individuals within groups, all genres, all genders, and the performers, the musicians, alive or dead. And that selection criteria was absolutely key to moving forward initially with the articles, which then morphed into chapters in a book. Let's look at some of the artists and some of the people. I made one decision right off the bat, and that tied to family, and that tied to my uncle, Morris Eisenstadt, my dad's youngest brother. There's a slide of him. How he came into the book was a decision I made right off the bat, in part because of connection with Moe Koffman. let's go to that slide if we can, Grant. Um, my uncle Moe Eisenstadt was a pal of Moe Koffman, who was a pal of everybody. And one of the realities with Moe Koffman was that he said to my uncle Moe Eisenstadt, television is happening and commercials and jingles are happening. And that's where the dough is. Mo, that's where the dough is. So get on board with me and join me in this side hustle, if you will, in addition to my career as a musician with the CBC and so on and so forth. And Moe Koffman, of course, penned a lot of wonderful tunes. The one that he's probably best known for is Swing and Shepherd Blues, and I'd like to play a little of that for you now. We're going to end it right there. We've got lots of music to share with you, and I know many of you would like to hear all of the tunes or most of the tunes in their entirety. We don't have enough time to do that, but we're going to give you enough of a taste, hopefully. Let's flip to the next slide. I mentioned my uncle, who was Moe Koffman's friend, Morris Eisenstadt. My uncle, born in Calgary, clarinetist, saxophonist, came to Toronto to make his fortune. He lived the life of a starving musician. We never knew a lot about Uncle Moe, except from his annual visits. He had hooked up as his career was evolving. He hooked up with the Moxie Whitney Orchestra. And those of you in Toronto or in other parts of the country might remember that Moxie Whitney had this giant dance band. And Moxie Whitney were very much an imposing figure, black tie and tails, and the musicians were all in tuxedos. But they played all of the railway hotels, the CN Railway, the CP Railway hotels, and whether it was the Royal York in Toronto, the Palliser Hotel in Calgary, the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa, that's where they played. Uncle Moe, our Uncle Moe, came back to Calgary to visit family because he had a 3-week gig at the Banff Springs Hotel. He had another 3-week gig up in Jasper. He had another 3-week gig at the Chateau Lake Louise. So we got to see him and we got to hear about him. And his career ultimately evolved after his time with Moxie Whitney. He hooked up with the O'Keefe Center Orchestra in Toronto, and next to Bill McCauley, who was the longtime conductor, our Uncle Moe was the second longest tenured musician. But music's a tough gig, and those in the business know that. Toward the latter part of his career, he found that his conductor, Bill McCauley, had to leave the position because of health issues. New conductor came in and, just like any other business, took a hard look at the business of the O'Keefe Center Orchestra and decided to cut the budget, therefore had to cut chairs, had to cut people, had to cut musicians. And he said to my Uncle Moe, who was a lifelong clarinetist and saxophonist, "Moe, you ever played the flute?" My uncle was 62 at the time. He said, "Nope." He said, "You want to keep your chair? You have to learn how to play the flute." He did that. He passed away 3 years later from health issues, but I think the emotional stress of having to keep his job certainly took its toll. What kind of music did Uncle Moe play? Well, he didn't take Moe Koffman's advice, and although he did write some jingles, but he was a classical musician, and that's the genre he chose. Let's go to another musician, a Torontonian, Percy Faith. Percy almost didn't make it into our book, into my first book, and there is a slide on Percy. One of the challenges was to find a photograph of Percy Faith where he didn't look unhappy and stern. I think we have that slide coming up next. There he is. Well, here you see him smiling, and he's actually conducting. But as I was putting the book together, I literally had 29 ready to go. I desperately wanted a photograph of Percy Faith, and I'd written all sorts of organizations, CBS Records, Sony, getting no response. And obviously, I wanted Percy in the book, and I wanted a happy picture, and it was not my way to just lift something from the internet and hope that would be fine. There is copyright, there is permission, and that's how we do things. So I ultimately learned that he has a grandson living outside of Pittsburgh. So I sent off a text message and then an email, and did get a reply. And Percy Faith's grandson, basically said, we don't have the rights to Grandpa Percy's pictures. Oh my goodness. Well, how did Percy Faith become a conductor? He took piano lessons as a kid. At 9 years of age, there was a fire in the family home. He raced in to save his sister, but he burned his hands. The piano stopped. He took a side turn, if you will, and became very interested in composition and conducting. And that's ultimately what led him to this magnificent career in the movies. And he moved to Hollywood after spending time with CBS and conducting an orchestra in Chicago and so on. But back to the Percy Faith picture. My goodness, I need a photograph. Percy's grandson ultimately put me in touch with the son of a photographer who in Hollywood took all kinds of photographs of starlets, sports personalities, musicians, etc. And the fellow's name was Lee Weiner. And basically connected with him, told him of my dilemma, and he said, let me see if I can find a picture of Percy Faith smiling, hopefully conducting. And within a few days, I heard back, and I'm then now waiting for, the answer to the next question. What would you like for the photograph? The photographer, very generous, very kind. And he said, David, if in fact you write that first book, I'd like a signed copy. And lo and behold, I got this picture. Percy Faith composed lots of wonderful movie music. Theme from a Summer Place was clearly his signature tune, but there was another one that I think you'll recognize from the movie Dr. Zhivago called Laura's Theme. Let's, Grant, play a couple of minutes of that if we can. Laura's Theme from Dr. Zhivago. Let's move on to the next artists in my collection. And I have to tell you, I really enjoyed my time with two of the Four Diamonds. You might remember the group back in the day. Two of the Four Diamonds were Torontonians, Stan Fisher and Phil Levitt. They were both students at the University of Toronto. Phil went into mechanical engineering, Stan went into law. And there's a great debate out there in Diamond Land, if you will, that Stan Fisher really wasn't a diamond. He chose literally at the beginning of the trajectory, the positive trajectory for the group who were in New York. He chose to spend his time in law school. Not that Phil didn't spend his time in mechanical engineering school, but he chose to leave the group in the very early days. And but my research very much validates the fact that those who say he wasn't one of the original diamonds are full of beans, because he really was and really is. Both alive, still in Toronto, and their signature tune was Little Darlin'. And let's play that, a bit of that for you now.
Little darling, oh, little darling, oh, where are you, my lover? I was wrong to try to love you, but no, well, that my lover was just for you.
One of the challenges of putting book one and subsequently book two and now working on book three together is to get is to try to cover as many genres as possible. And there are so many wonderful talents that before I knew it, I was swamped with nominations from all sorts of people who'd say, did you know my cousin so-and-so was with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra for from 1952 to 1963, or he sang it, he was the drummer in a rock group, and you really have to write about him. And that's made this journey for me so much fun, from the Genesis right through the other 5 books. The reality is that so many of these musicians were on the road, and their connectivity to family and friends was distant. It was remote. The reality of being on the road and losing family connections was something that happened a lot. One of those musicians was a fellow by the name of Corky Lang. There's a slide of Corky coming up next. And Corky is a drummer with a rock group called Mountain. And I think we've got that slide coming up right now. And the reference to songs tied to mothers it leads us to the Corky Lang slide. I think I've jumped ahead just a little bit. Corky Lang, born in Montreal, interesting kind of career, bounced around with different groups, but ultimately tied very much to family. Again, a single family scenario. His dad had departed sort of early on, but he was really connected to his mother. And he used to write her a letter every day from the road. And you might look at him and sort of say, well, bit of a strange fellow, but very talented, really good drummer. And you might remember those rockers who were watching this presentation. The big hit song for Mountain was called Mississippi Queen. Let's play a little of that for you. Moe Koffman. Let's go on to the next artist because the theme on the next couple of slides, as well as the Corky Lang one, the next artist, Rick Moranis. You might say, well, my goodness, Rick Moranis, he's an actor. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Well, you know, he's basically a musician. He's an actor. He's a comedian, and he actually recorded a number of songs. He too loved his mother, and the way he showed it was in an album with the lead tune "My Mother's Brisket." And for those of you who may not have had dinner or had an early dinner or are going to have dinner after this presentation today, I think you'll enjoy My Mother's Brisket. Let's play a little bit of that.
The smell first hits me from 5 blocks away. It's Friday and I can't stay away. The Blue Jays are playing, but I won't likely risk it. I'm here with a plan to binge on her brisket. My mother's brisket, so moist and tender, always sends me on another Shabbos bender. The onions and carrots look nice. I don't need them, and potatoes, no dice. There are only 2 things that suffice: my mother and her brisket. My mother's brisket, so silky smooth. Whatever might happen all week, there's nothing quite like it to soothe. Don't need a Vorspice or any dessert. I got no room, my stomach already hurts. On Monday I'm altering shirts thanks to her brisket.
There's another performer who had issues with her mother. Not brisket issues so much, but telephone issues. Don't know if you remember the children's music performers, Jim and Rosalie, 1970 to 1993. As so happens, groups break up, duets break up, septets break up. But Rosalie Moscow is back, and she's quite a wonderful talent. She's Toronto born, and she's got all sorts of new stuff available. If you were to go to her website, you'd really find for your grandchildren, her music is absolutely ideal. And she's always had a lot of fun with everything she's done. And in this sort of little bit of a mother's theme, if you will, Mommy, get off the phone is something I'd like to play a bit of for you now.
Mommy, you've got so much to say. Mommy, can it wait for another day? I am just so tired of waiting all alone. Please, Mommy, get off the phone. Mommy, you said you'd read to me. Mommy, I've been waiting patiently. I am just so tired of waiting all alone. Please, Mommy, get off the phone.
Let's go to the next slide, which I've titled Music Helps Us Get Through Tough Times and Freilach Times. Freilach, for those who need a translation, happy. You know, it's life. We have tough times, we have happy times, but music is kind of, the river runs through it, if you will. It's always there. It's always there, and whatever your preference in music is, the genres are all there. It's certainly therapeutic in so many ways. An example of how music has helped someone's career through a tough time is Ruth Lowe. and she's going to come up next on our slides here. Ruth Lowe is a composer, Toronto-born, and lost her husband through, again, health issues. And essentially, not to overstate it or understate it, but she really went into a funk. And the funk, though, led her to composing a tune that kind of brought her back. And to fast forward it, Frank Sinatra heard this tune. He kind of made it his own. It's called I'll Never Smile Again, and it mirrored the difficulty she was going through, having lost her husband. And I'd like to play a bit of I'll Never Smile Again for you now, because it's a wonderful, keeping that smile and happy tone. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the next performer, the next musician in my list, classical and jazz trumpeter by the name of Jens Lindemann. Whenever I hear the sweet, not necessarily shrill sound of a trumpet, my mind's eye immediately goes to focuses on Herb Alpert, the Tijuana Brass, Guido Basso was with Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass, Al Hurt, Harry James, the Cuban phenomenon, Arturo Sandoval. But I discovered in my research this wonderful trumpeter who was born in Germany, family landed in Edmonton, and again, Polish Jewish background. And, like so many musicians, he got into it in high school, and ultimately has carved an unbelievable career. And his work is marvelous. When I was thinking about happy music, sad music, there's a wonderful tune in this smiling genre that I'd like you to hear, and the beautiful tones coming from Jens Lindemann. Tune's called Smile. I hate cutting the music off because it's really the collection, I think, is really quite wonderful, and it makes me happy. One of the challenges of the original outreach of to find talent was to find musicians who were not all geographically centered in Toronto or Montreal. So someone like Jens Lindemann out of Edmonton, Corky Lang out of Montreal, really kind of helped make things easier. I also found finding really talented female musicians initially very difficult, and after I started doing some research, it didn't become difficult at all. And I have some examples that I'm going to show you next, but I want you to hear a most wonderful version of Leonard Cohen's "Dance Me to the End of Love" by Batsheva. Batsheva is a Toronto-based musician. She also worked in the media. We should go to that slide. No, let's stay on Batsheva for a moment. But she, like so many of the musicians that I have in the book, have found their way to Nashville. Eddie Schwartz, who co-wrote "Hit Me With Your Best Shot," Pat Benatar, he's in Nashville. Again, Batsheva's in Nashville. There's a young man whose name is Dave Cohen from Calgary. There's another geographic issue who's a country and western recording artist and producer. But again, making it around the world, but being based in Nashville. Batsheva sings in English, in Ladino, in Hebrew, Yiddish, and I'd like you to listen to a bit of the rendition, "Dance Me to the End of Love," because it's really quite wonderful.
Dance me to your beauty with a burning violin. Dance me through the panic till I'm gathered safely in. Lift me like an olive branch, be my homeward dove. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love. Tanz mir zu dein Schönheit, mit der Fiedel halb verbrennt. Mit Olivzweigele bin ich eingenommen in deine Hand. Sei wie mein Taimul, sei wie mein Heim. Tanz mit mir zu der Ende, tanz. Tanz mit mir zu der Ende, tanz.
I'd like to go to the next slide because there are, in both books, great chapters on very talented people. One of the realities that continues to drive my wanting to do this is the payback, not the paycheck, the payback of, I didn't know she was Jewish. Really? My goodness. I didn't know she was, Erica Goodman as an example, the 50th best harpist in the world. Erica's unbelievably talented. I can't imagine 49 others are better than she is. But, you know, someone makes up those rankings. The joy of all of this also comes from, there isn't a day that goes by when I don't get an email, a text, a phone call saying, have you thought about writing about so-and-so, my cousin who was, in a klezmer group, in a dance band, as a vocalist, what have you. And the nominations just come fast and furious. And I'm grateful, and I do acknowledge people who have reached out. A good example is Maureen Forrester. People going, Maureen Forrester is Jewish, Montreal. She came from a really, really difficult childhood, family living way below the poverty line, but someone took a chance on her and helped her get voice lessons. Aviva Chernik, another wonderfully talented musician, London, Ontario, and I think many of you know of her and her background. And again, it's all in the book. Erica Goodman, unbelievable harpist. Let's go to the next slide. You'll see three other artists. On the right-hand side is Teresa Tova. Teresa's from Calgary, child of Holocaust survivors, moved to Calgary. I didn't know her growing up in Calgary, but I've come to know her in our adulthood. And she's an unbelievable talented as an actress, as a musician. Again, a lot of Yiddish singing, a lot of English singing, a lot of acting. Jean Lemon, if any of you know about Tafel music, she put a stamp on it for 30 plus years, and she's since passed away, but an unbelievable musical talent and a lovely person. Sophie Milman, a jazz singer. I have some music I'd like you to hear. My Baby Just Cares for Me. She's sultry. She's talented. I was doing a 1 hour host your own music show on Jazz FM 91 in Toronto, and I wasn't aware of Sophie Milman. I'd finished the session and was sitting in the Jazz FM 91 reception area, and all of a sudden I heard this most beautiful mellifluous voice coming through the speakers, and I've just been captivated by her stuff from that point on. This goes back a couple of years. She's in the first book. Let's hear My Baby Just Cares for Me, at least a bit of it.
My baby don't care for shows. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me. Ooh, my baby don't care for cars and races. My baby don't care for those high-tone places listed.
I'm going to move on to Amy Sky just briefly. Another wonderful talent, Torontonian. Slide will come up in a second. And we're not going to, the tune I would have played for you, but I will not be playing right now, is Lacha Dodi. Amy Sky is married to Marc Jordan, you may know. An unbelievable talent, and she's very, very charitable. She does all sorts of events for all kinds of organizations, and she's very much part of the community. But I would urge you, if you decide you want to delve into more of her, she's quite unbelievable. There's another artist I've got to play for you, Nikki Yanofsky, Montreal-based, kind of a teenage talent, kind of fell under the radars, been coming back, and she does a lot of fun stuff. And I particularly liked her rendition of Jeepers Creepers. So if we could play a little bit of that for you, I think you'll get the sense. If you don't know of her, you should know of her.
Every time you talk to me, I see those big brown batters. You can almost guarantee I'll be at a loss for words. Every time you walk my way, I get all flustered. I just don't know what to say when I wanna flirt with you. Oh, jeepers, creepers, where'd you get those peepers? Jeepers, creepers, where'd you get those eyes? Oh gosh, oh get up, how they get so lit up. Gosh, oh gee, oh, how they get that size. Every time you make a move, it's like I'm frozen. 'Cause you are all so smooth, you got me paralyzed. Glad you set me in your sights, 'cause you're so charming. When you look like cinnamon, I'm so taken by surprise. Oh, jeepers.
Jeepers Creepers. My journey of identifying notable Canadian Jewish musicians is almost an everyday experience for me, and I want to show you the next slide because there's a collection of talented musicians. Some are in book one, some are in book two. Let's go to the slide with Josh, so-called Dolgan. He's a rapper. And if anyone hasn't heard of Josh, so-called Dolgan, he goes by the moniker so-called. You need to dig into this. Bert Pearl, Winnipeg-based, wanted to be a doctor. The family didn't have a lot of money. He worked part-time jobs. He had a terrific voice. He wound up working with CKY in Winnipeg as a DJ, and he was a pianist. That's what he did. The CBC was looking to start a national radio show, which would kind of happen around the midday mark, and they recruited a wonderful collection of musicians, but they were desperate for a leader that had the personality, that had the gift of the gab, who could kind of make stuff happen. And Bert Pearl became that individual. He one of the producers from CBC Toronto went to Winnipeg, brought him to Toronto. He auditioned, he got the gig. When I was in junior high school, come home for lunch, my mom had the Happy Gang on the radio. I know lots of people whose families lived with radio and music and the variety show, and Bert Pearl was certainly synonymous with making a lot of people happy. Dave Cohen, I mentioned earlier, he's the young man who's a country and western producer in Nashville. How did I get to Dave Cohen? Well, a second cousin whose son in high school played in a rock band with Dave Cohen said, "David, you got to write about Dave Cohen. You need a country and western component in your book. He's the guy." William Shatner, people go, "Well, he's not under the radar." Well, certainly as an actor, he's not under the radar, but he is classified as a musician. And I thought he was worthy of being included in my second book, 36 Notable Canadian Jewish Performers. Montreal-based. Let me tell you about Howard Shore. Our next door neighbor, Mark Mager, and I, in the summertime, we play baseball on the street like kids. We throw the ball back and forth. Car comes, we go car, and we get off the road. We then get back on. He said, "You know, you got to write about my friend Howard Shore." And I looked at him quizzically, and Howard Shore, Lord of the Rings trilogy, and so much other stuff. Well, Mark and Lorne Michaels from Saturday Night Live fame and Howard were pals in high school and summer camp. As the years passed, Howard went off to Berklee School of Music. Lorne Michaels went to New York, and Mark built a very successful woodworking high-end furniture business. I started digging into Howard Shore, and one of the things I learned, and again, that's part of the payback for me, because if I don't know that, lots of other people don't know that. But I discovered he was he was the band leader for Lorne Michaels for the first number of years on Saturday Night Live. So, you know, connections run deep. His Lord of the Rings music, just a sample of his talent. But I'd like to play a little of music from The Shire to give you a feel. If you don't know the music, you should know the music. Again, I hate cutting it off, but I've got more to share with you. I talked about all genders, all genres, and I've in the next few slides have tried to put a sampling of some of the performers in the two books. I'd like to go to the next slide, the one that shows Paul Hoffert, Mike Levine, and Danny Marks. They're all rockers. Let me start with Danny Marks. Danny, as you might know, is a blues expert. He has a show on Saturday night on Jazz FM 91, which you can get on the internet if you're not in Toronto, but if you're in Toronto, you can pick it up. Again, Jazz FM 91. He's got a wonderful tune, which I really love, called Man on the Radio, and Danny is the guy. But he, again, another example of the starving musician, or at least a musician who had to change his career because of the way of the world. He was one of the founders of a rock group called Edward Bear. And Danny told me, and it's the quote in the book, at 18, I was a rock star. At 21, I was a has-been. And I think that personifies so many of musicians in different genres. But again, he's carved out a new world for himself, of which music is so much a part. I'd like to play a little bit of You, Me in Mexico, because that was the hit that made him that rock star at 18. Can we play that, Grant? Paul Hoffert, an unbelievable talent, absolute brilliant, and a nice guy too. You might remember the group Lighthouse. I want to play a little bit of One Fine Morning for you. Let me tell you about Mike Levine. Toronto rock group called Triumph. They dominated rock music in the 1980s, adored by fans around the world. And they were known as the Other Power Trio. I have a quote in the book from Bass Magazine's Pretty, who said, Triumph lives unfairly, somewhat in the shadow of their fellow countryman, Rush. Now, you remember I said to you at the beginning when I was doing my non-empirical research, asking people name notable Canadian Jewish musicians, Leonard Cohen and Geddy Lee Rush was number 2. Well, Mike Levine and his guys were literally unbelievably successful, but playing in the shadow of Rush. Levine is a bassist, a keyboardist. He's basically hard rock and progressive rock, heavy metal guy. And he was a co-founder of Triumph. And if we can play a little bit of his music, I'd like to do that as well. Do we have that up on? Yes, we do. I think you'll remember this too. The rockers in the crowd, of course.
Something's at the edge of your mind. You don't know what it is. Something you were hoping to find. You're not sure what it is. Then you hear the music and it all comes crystal clear. Music does the talking, says the things you want to hear. I'm young, I'm wild, I'm free. Got the magic power of the music in me. I'm young, I'm wild, I'm free. Got the magic power of the music in me.
Let's move to the next slide. More rockers. Stephen Page. He fell under the radar after he left Bare Naked Ladies. You know the song, If I Had $1 Million. Let's listen to it.
If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a house. I would buy you a house. And if I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, buy you furniture for your house, maybe a nice Chesterfield or an ottoman. And if I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a K car, a nice Reliant automobile. And if I had $1 million, I'd buy your love.
You're muted, David.
I did that because I had a little bit of a cough. I thought I should go off the air for that. So let me try again. Nick St. Nicholas. His name is Nicholas Castenbaum. Lived in Toronto's West End. Joined a motorcycle gang. Learned how to play the guitar. And ultimately became the bass guitarist of Steppenwolf. Let's listen to a Steppenwolf tune.
Get your motor running, head out on the highway, looking for adventure, and whatever comes our way. Yeah, darling, go make it happen. Take the world in a loving place. space. I like smoking lightning. Heavy metal thunder, racing with the wind, and the feeling that I'm under. Yeah.
Oh, David, unmute.
I keep unmuting. My apology. Zalyanovsky, another rocker. These three guys might be considered bad boys because rock has always had that kind of aura, if you will. Good guys, not necessarily bad boys, but Zalyanovsky and one of his pals back in the Love and Spoonful days was actually deported back to Canada. Back when the laws were a little bit different as it related to substance abuse. Actually, I had a number of people say to me, with Stephen Page, why didn't you write about all his misadventures? And why didn't you write more about Zalyanovsky's misadventures? And I chose not to do that because I wasn't writing for the National Enquirer, but needed some context. So there is a line in each of the chapters that kind of talks about some fall from grace. But Yanofsky came back to Canada and wound up in Kingston, Ontario, of all places, and got into the restaurant business. He'd been sort of fed up with music, and he opened a restaurant. And some of you who have traveled to Kingston may know the restaurant called Chez Piggy. Interesting name for a Jewish kid. In any event, he's passed away, but his daughter Zoe runs the restaurant today, and food's pretty good. So that's a quick collection of rockers. I want to move to jazz masters because there are some wonderfully talented musicians in each of the two books. Steve Coven, wonderful keyboardist and a lovely guy. He has a tune called Lola Land that I really, really like, and I'd like to play it for you. Should be there.
Not seeing that one, David.
Okay, well, let's move on to Bernie Sinensky. I thought I'd given you Lola Land, but my apology. It's if you can find a Steve Coven album, a CD, and he plays often. He plays around Toronto a lot. Very often at the Rex Hotel and at a wonderful Ethiopian restaurant called Hirut on the Danforth. If you catch Steve, he's there, I think, every fourth Thursday every month. Let's go to Bernie Sinensky. Bernie Sinensky was Moe Koffman's longtime piano player and a composer in his own right. And he has a tune called Wheel Within a Wheel. And I'd like to play that one for you, and I do think we have it up. I had a chance to see Bernie play as part of a Moe Koffman tribute band up at York University some months ago, and he certainly hasn't lost his touch. In fact, one of his colleagues in the group is Moe Koffman's grandson, Jake, who I actually have written about, and he will be in my my next book, which is called Musicians Under the Radar, 42 Notable Canadian Jewish Musicians. Wonderful, wonderful talent. Another saxophonist who you might know as Paul Brody. He's in the business, he's legendary. Another group, classical performers. I was fortunate enough, if we can go to that slide, there's a slide that says classical performers, but then we've got shots of initially three talents, Boris Brodhoff of Harnoy and Brian Cherney. I was fortunate enough to be able to connect with the late Boris Brod roughly 3.5 weeks before he was tragically killed in a hit and run accident in Hamilton. It was very, very, very sad. But Canada's music ambassador, a title very well deserved. Offer Harnoy, a wonderful cellist. I first heard her at a performance at Temple Sinai in Toronto, and was quite mesmerized by her technique and by her approach. But she fell under the radar, as so many of the musicians. Again, in my mind's eye, she fell under the radar. A couple of reasons. There was some family discord on one hand, and again, not going into anything more than a line or so in the book, but her mother had taken ill, and Offer had decided to care for her mom and park her music career to the side for a number of years, and the number of years turned out to be 7. But things have a way of moving on. Her mother did pass, and Offer resumed her career. She also resumed a relationship with someone that was a love of her life, a multi-instrumentalist, a wonderful musician, not Jewish, Mike Harriott, living in St. John's, Newfoundland. And the two of them are making beautiful music together and individually from St. John's. Again, under the radar. Where is she now? Brian Cherney, an educator in Montreal, a wonderful, wonderful composer, and a real talent in a very quiet academic way. I'd like to move to the next slide and tell you about another cellist, Zara Nelsova, known as Queen of the Cello, from Montreal. I played a bit of Batsheva's music earlier, and when I was speaking with Batsheva as I was cobbling that chapter together, Batsheva told me that her mom had taken her to a concert in Toronto to hear Zara Nelsova, and believed all the time until she read it in the book that Zara Nelsova was Russian, of Russian heritage, but Montreal-based. Robert Silverman, an academic, a wonderful, wonderful classical composer and pianist. Robert headed the University of British Columbia Music School for 35 years and retired a couple of years ago, but his music is available and absolutely wonderful music, and truly a real talent. Oscar Morowitz, a fixture in Toronto, another composer. I had a note from his daughter Claudia, who basically said, "Thank you for keeping my father's profile at least a little higher than it's been, because too often musicians are forgotten, and as a composer, he shouldn't be forgotten." There's another category that we've included in the books under what I call klezmer and Yiddish musicians. And if we could flip to that slide, Grant, I'd appreciate it. And let me just show you some names and some faces. And again, they're all in the book. David Bookbinder, spending a lot of time in New Orleans. I hope he's coming back soon. But one of the finest trumpeters around. I talked to you earlier about Josh, so-called Dolgan, the rapper, and a colleague of Noam Lemish's up at York, Brian Katz. And I do have some music of his that he does with another musician, another singer by the name of Lenka Lichtenberg. They've done a tune called Pastes, and I'd like to play some of that for you now.
Pastes emes die Geschenkeit sich verbrüdern von das Neu. Es wird so werden stiller Leute und bleiben sich allein nur frei. Komm, Pastes, war was von Leben. Verschicker mich, trink mich an, so sich weiteren von Fälschung, von Sorgen gewärtigen.
Let's go to the next slide. More Yiddish. Wolf Krakowski does a wonderful version of Shabbos, Shabbos, Shabbos. Teresa Tova, I mentioned her earlier. She's just a knockout. One of the things she does too is she's a music industry activist. She fights for the rights of fairness for performers. God bless you, Teresa. God bless you, Tova. She says, don't call me Teresa Tova, call me Tova. I'll always call you Tova. Ben Mink. We live in small worlds. I mentioned Eddie Schwartz earlier, who co-wrote, among other things, and he's also a music industry activist in Nashville. He'd written the piece for Pat Benatar, Hit Me With Your Best Shot. Ben Mink just received an Order of Canada. Unbelievably talented multi-instrumentalist. He's backed and co-written stuff with K.D. Lang forever. If you like K.D. Lang, you'll love Ben Mink, because he's just the nth unbelievably talented guy. Another category, folk music. Let's turn to folk music and the challenge I've had in trying to find musicians who are not always based in, or their careers were not just Toronto or Montreal centric. My sister, Marcia Bell, and brother, Alan Bell in Calgary, told me about a fellow by the name of Mike Kobluck. Mike Kobluck is from Nanaimo, British Columbia. There are Jews in Nanaimo, British Columbia, obviously, but he decided to go to school at a Catholic university, of all places, in Spokane, Washington, called Gonzaga. And there he joined the Glee Club. He wound up hooking up with Chad Mitchell and subsequently John Denver. And if any of you remember music from the Chad Mitchell trio, Kobluck, part of it from the beginning to the end. Those of you who are Toronto-based will remember all the coffee houses in Yorkville, the Yorkville district. And a regular fixture was a duo, Malka and Yoso. She was Israeli. He's from Croatia. Everybody thought he was Jewish. Not so. Anyway, the Malka and Yoso duo was just hotter than a firecracker. And we fast forward to today, Yoso's son, Leo Spralja, continues a restaurant that Yoso started after the Malka and Yoso career came to an end. Want to flip over to the next slide, and as we come to at least the end of my presentation, when I was at the University of Calgary, I was a disc jockey, and one day learned that this fellow by the name of Oscar Brand was coming to the campus. Apparently, he was working all of the university campuses in both Canada and the United States. I mean, he literally was on the road all the time, and was just taken with his music and his style and his format. Fast forward, he wound up in New York, and for so much of his career, he did it remotely, and then he did it live every Saturday night. He had a talk show that kind of preceded all of those television talk shows. But he worked for this radio station and did a show every Saturday night for 70 years. And he never had a contract. He never got paid. He was a very creative guy and ultimately hooked up with Jim Henson and was very much involved with the creation of the Muppets. And it is rumored, and that's the only way I could have reported it, that the Oscar the Grouch character was modeled somewhat after Oscar Brand, kind of an acerbic guy, but a lovely guy nevertheless. And speaking of lovely guys, the last bit of music I'd like to play for you comes from a group called The Travelers. Jerry Gray and Jerry Goodis, and I actually was privileged to work for Jerry Goodis's advertising agency, Goodis Goldberg Soren, a number of years ago, and Jerry Goodis has passed on. But Jerry Gray and Jerry Goodis got their folk music start at Camp Nieville, north of Toronto, back in the day. And it was a very left-wing, kind of pinkish crowd. And the two Jerrys and others would perform Saturday night hootenannies and sing songs around the campfire. And at one point, Pete Seeger had come to Camp Nieville to perform. And he came with two gifts, Jerry Gray told me. Gift number one was a banjo, which he gave to Jerry Gray. And the other was a tune called This Land Is Your Land, which during the McCarthy era, none of the folk music performers were allowed to play. So the Woody Guthrie tune, This Land Is Your Land, couldn't be performed by Woody Guthrie, nor could it be performed by Lee Hayes or Pete Seeger or any of the others. Pete Seeger said to Jerry Gray, I want you to make this tune your own, Canadianize it. Give it life, but make it Canadian. So the last tune we're going to play in this collection is some of This Land Is Your Land, the Canadian version.
This land is your land.
Let's play it all.
This land is my land. From Monte Vista to the Vancouver Island, from the Arctic Circle to the Great Lake waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From Monte Vista to the Vancouver Island, from the Arctic Circle to the Great Lake water, this land was made for you and me. When the sun came shining and I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving and the dust clouds rolling, as the fog was lifting, our voice was chanting, saying, this land was made for you and me. This land
little closing sidebar on Jerry Gray and the Travelers. That tune has resonated so much in the folk music world. Jerry was actually invited to put on a tuxedo. I don't know how often he did that as a folk singer, but he actually conducted oh goodness, it was that wonderful, wonderful choir from the United States. And he did it here in Toronto. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir, that's what it was. I've got lots of music in my head. But Jerry was actually invited to conduct that group and celebrate Canada, which is what we all try to do. This has been a lot of fun. And I hope those of you who've tuned in learned something. Maybe a few I didn't know that, or I didn't know she was Jewish. I didn't know he played this instrument, and so on and so forth. But it's been a lot of fun. I want to thank Noam Lemish, the head of the music department at York, Julie Feinberg, and Grant McNair, who's helped me very much with the sound and lights of this presentation. And as I discussed with Noam Lemish, I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. That was wonderful. That was a wonderful presentation, and indeed, I certainly learned a lot. And I hope that everybody in attendance also not only learned but enjoyed the wonderful musical examples that you shared. And now we'll open the floor for questions. I mean, a couple of questions. There's a question that we can answer already in the chat. But before we do that, and while people are taking time perhaps to type their questions, I thought I would ask you to tell us about the next book, which you said is coming out soon, and perhaps you could tell us about that.
Well, the next book is called, and there is a slide actually, and that's the shameless plug. It's called Musicians Under the Radar, 42 Notable Canadian Musicians. And to give you an example of the discovery, when I was thinking about cobbling it together, I thought, well, a nice progression, 30, 36, 42. But here's what I learned. There's a whole connection to Kabbalah with the number 42. And those who are more religious would probably know that. But, and I'm not going to give it away because I will explain it in the book. But there's a wonderful collection of 42 notable Canadian Jewish musicians who, again, in my mind's eye, are under the radar. The book, we hope, will be on Amazon as the first 2 volumes. And the timeline looks about Father's Day, so middle of June 2024.
Well, that's exciting. That's coming up. That's coming up soon. And I think, did I hear you say you had a plan to write 5? Is that what I heard you say?
Well, people are asking, well, when are you going to write the 4th one? And I've simply said, let's get number 3 out and one book at a time. But again, it's a hobby. It's become a hobby, and as I said earlier, Noam, there isn't a day that goes by that someone doesn't share a name of a performer, of a musician who, in their eyes, are under the radar. So if it works for them, it's certainly going to work for me. And I guess maybe the next jump will have to go from 42 to 48. But
that's right.
We'll cross that bridge.
Yeah, well, I certainly enjoyed seeing, in addition to Brian Katz, also Steve Coven and Lauren Lofsky, 2 longtime faculty members in the Department of Music at York University. Well, let me turn to the questions in the chat. So Anne Dublin asks, well, she says, thanks so much for this incredible overview of Canadian Jewish musicians. I wonder if you've considered including people like producers, agents, and publicists who helped promote these very talented performers.
Well, here's how I can answer that, and it ties back, Noam, to your question. One of the people in the next book, 42, is Walter Homburger, who you might remember was Glenn Gould's manager for many, many years. But he really shepherded the Toronto Symphony Orchestra as a business executive. So, I'm looking. I guess I'm looking at everyone, but in my heart and in my head, I really think it's the performers that need the covet, that need the credit, that need the recognition. And so I guess the first hurdle is, as I sift and sort, I'm also trying to relate the geography issue, trying to relate the genre issue, and the gender issue. So it's everyone gets a fair shake, and again, it's in my mind's eye. I remember somebody saying to me from the first book, Marc Jordan's in your book? Yeah, he's in my book. Well, I knew he was Jewish. I didn't know he was Canadian. Who knew?
Yeah. All right, let's see who we have. We have next. We do have a question here from an anonymous attendee who asks, what was the most challenging aspect of writing these books?
I can answer that in one page. At the back of the book, of each book, there is a list of credits, photo credits. And having come through the world of journalism and running a public relations firm, we've always felt it's important to recognize and give credit to a photographer, a videographer who has helped visually support the artist. And again, that the challenge, for example, I mentioned Percy Faith, and the difficulty of trying to find the right photograph, also not finding that I would be in a position of having to pay $2,500 for a picture, or to run a chapter in the book without a picture was against my grain. So if there was a section of any book that got tough, I mean, one can go on the internet and you see all these photographs and you see copyright and you see this and you see that. Well, again, the issue is to try to give the most credit possible and not be in a position of not, in some cases, for example, in the next book, there is a chapter on Cantor Louis Danto, a Toronto institution, long since passed. His daughter, Denise Lash, and I have known each other for some time. And I said, I need a great picture of your dad. And she found a photograph that was in their family collection, but there was no name of the photographer. She said, David, can you run the picture? I said, you bet. It's absolutely perfect. What we wound up doing is referring to it as Danto Family Collection. And that's honest, and that's true, and that's accurate. But if there was a name of a photographer, the photographer's name would have been there instead of.
Yes, so that's some of the interesting challenges. Now, there is another comment and question. Thanks for the terrific presentation. Actually, there are many comments, David, that you can see that I'm not going to read right now, but about how people enjoyed the talk and some suggestions as well for people. There are already
that's book 5. That's
yes,
recording book 5.
Yeah, suggestions coming in for artists that should be considered. But the question that I wanted to ask here is, in your opinion, who do you consider to be the most influential Canadian Jewish musician of all time?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to that troika, that triumvirate of Leonard Cohen, Geddy Lee, and Drake. Those are the names that just keep coming up and coming up and coming up, and they're clearly way above the radar. Not to negate people who are, but they don't need a chapter in David Eisenstadt's book. Not that anybody necessarily needs it, but so again, There are so many, and the discovery is terrific. There's another musician in the next book, and he's considered a musician. His name is Lorne Greene. You're going to go, Lorne Greene, Bonanza, Paul Cartwright, absolutely. But he's classified as a musician. But he was a newsman. He was with the CBC forever, out of Ottawa and then Toronto. He was known as the voice of doom because during World War II, he had the unhappy job of reading the names of deceased service people, sailors, Army, Navy, whatever. Somebody would say, Lorne Greene, well, why is he in your book? Well, because he actually recorded songs. And the one that he's most noted for is a song called Ringo, which he very wisely, or his producers very wisely suggested he release in 1964 as the Beatles were taking off. And there was confusion in the marketplace because they thought this song about Ringo the cowboy was about Ringo Starr, the drummer. Another fact.
Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing here that we have a message from Thomas Sandler saying, great project, David. Thanks so much for giving a great shout out to my mom, Ruth Lowe. So wonderful to have you in attendance, Thomas, and indeed wonderful to have Ruth Lowe featured in your work, David.
For sure, absolutely deserved.
Well, I want to thank everyone who tuned in today to check out our event, the presentation by David Eisenstadt here, closing our second season of Sound and Sense, Jewish Music at York. And I, once again, David, thank you so much. Thank you to Grant McNair for all of your incredible technical support, for running this event smoothly. And thanks again, everyone. I look forward to welcoming you and seeing you at a future virtual or in-person event at York University. So until then, enjoy the warmer weather and summer, and be well. All the best.
Thank you, Noam, and thank you everybody for taking time to spend with us.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.